All right, so this is going to be a Coleman, not lantern, but stove project here. You got some other random projects going on in the back there, just kind of ignore those. Those are upcoming. Hopefully we get to those here. But anyway, so the story on this is I got this from one of the teachers I used to work with. It's actually his father-in-law, and I don't know what the whole story is behind if he collects or maybe collects a little bit, but they know they've been to the house, so they've seen the collection I have. And I guess his father-in-law couldn't get this thing going. So I said, yeah, I can look at it. I'm not an expert on Coleman stoves here, and obviously this is a pretty old one, just because this is nickel. I'm looking at the way the pump is in here. It's actually got two screws that holds it in. So I believe this is like what they call a 500. I didn't date it or anything like that. And like I said, I'm not a stove expert. I suppose if I jumped online, I could find out exactly what this is in about 30 seconds. But I'll show you what I did here to get this thing fired up. Okay, so the problem was, I guess it wouldn't light. So when my wife brought it home from school, the first thing I noticed was over here where the fuel cap is. When I took a look at that, that's the first thing I checked, is that to see if the gasket was good, and the gasket actually was not. It was all cracked because, like I said, this is an older stove. I don't know if you can see there's some printing on the front here of the actual, or you can kind of see it on the front of the fount. But anyway, so the gasket was bad, so all I did to get this apart here, the easiest way to do it is to screw it on back onto the fount, and then once you got it tight, you usually can break this free, that screw, and then this is like what they call a three-piece cap. There's a little piece in here, a little brass piece, the screw, and then the actual cap part. So the gaskets I had, I bought these from this place called Bassinets, I guess is what it's called. They make decent stuff. I've used them before. But these are specifically for 242 lanterns. And it says also 242 and 500 stoves. So this is, I'm assuming, a 500 stove. I think it says that on here. And this is what they call number one filler cap seal. So if you're in a pinch or bind, you could probably get an O-ring to work. But since I have this, I'm like, I'll put it on. And honestly, these are not very common because these are older stoves and lanterns, so to put one on there, not charge them anything, like, I don't think it's that big of a deal. It's probably like a 30-cent part. So anyway, once I got that going, the next thing I went to is to see if I could pressurize it up. So I went and tried pumping it, and everything in there seemed like it worked really well. And like you could tell before when I took the cap off, you could tell it was holding pressure. So then the next thing I went to was kind of look to see if there's anything leaking on here. This part on all the stoves, even the newer ones from like the 70s, that's like the weakest part of that. You gotta be so careful on this little piece of, like, I think that's copper or brass. It's a little tiny tube. And then it's like a compression thing that goes into this block here. So you gotta be careful with that. So at this point then, so I pressurized, I turned it on, I could hear gas, and I saw like gas leaking out in here. Where this, I don't know if that's called like the burner assembly in here or what that's called. But anyway, I could see gas in there, so I was like, all right, I want to get this screw off and to see what's going on in here. Maybe this is full of like spider webs or some sort of crust, and that's why it's not actually burning. Well, couldn't get that screw off, and it looked like somebody already attempted to take it off and kind of already messed up the top of the screw. I'll show you that. So you can see it's kind of tweaked just a little bit, and I'm like, well, obviously that's not going to go without putting some heat on it. So I got out the torch, and what I started to do was I just heated up this generator with the torch. I opened up the gas, and then I got a flame actually on the burner part here, the actual burner caps or whatever this is called. And it seemed to be burning fine. And then as I went to give it more gas, it went out. So I was like, okay, is it something with the gas? Is it something with the generator? So then I decided I got to pull the generator off. So I took my propane torch here, and I'll show you what I did. Okay, so to get that screw out, I figured from all the heat cycles that this thing has been through and rust, best thing to do is just take my propane here and I just put it at the bottom here, and I don't know how long it was, maybe 5 minutes tops. And then I went back at this with the correct size flat blade screwdriver or straight blade to make sure that I wouldn't, and it didn't take much effort. That came off, and this whole piece then pops right out of the top. Let's see if I think I can take that off. It's probably cool enough. It's still a little warm. So yeah, once that popped out, no problem. Took that off. Looked in there, everything looked good. It doesn't look like there's any, sometimes like wasps and stuff, if they're set out in the garage, they'll build stuff like that, nests and stuff, and they kind of clog it up. That looked good, and like I said, I could get it to burn down here, so I kind of had a feeling that this was probably pretty clean, but when I turned the knob, it's when it died out. So I worked on getting this next part here, the generator nut off, and then you got to take this assembly here off of the frame of the stove there. And like I said, this part here is very delicate, and that's got to actually come out of this block. So you take your 7/16 on there, and you very carefully loosen that. And then this actually has to come down out of there. You got a little set screw that holds this in, and once you got this loose, this will come out. It may take a little force, kind of wiggle it really gently, because you don't want to pull down with too much pressure and then kink it off, because then you're done. Then you got to find a replacement part, which is going to be almost impossible. And I pulled it out, and I'm not going to take it all apart now, but generators are all basically the same. This one here is from a lantern. So, and what you have is on, this is a newer one because there's a spring, but you got this little tiny part on the inside here that looks like a needle. You see that? Come on, focus in on that. I don't know if I'm going to get that. Well, there's a needle at the very tip here. Maybe I can get it. There you can kind of see it. So there's a needle there, and I pulled that out of the one that's on the stove. That looked fine. It wasn't all gunked up at the end. Usually there's some sort of packing. This one on this lantern uses a spring. The one in here, I believe, is like a cardboard tube, and I think that's an original generator too, just looking at it. Anyway, so that led me to the next thing, which is going to be on the top of this generator. They call these generators. There's a tip. So what you're going to want to do is take that tip off. Sometimes you can get them with a needle nose. They're not very tight. Sometimes you got to find the correct wrench to fit that, and it's pretty small. So anyway, you pull it out and you end up with something like this. So you got a little tiny piece here, tip with threads. And what I like to do with this is when you look at this, I don't know if we can do this on camera or not, but if you look through the tip, you should be able to see light through. So if you hold it up like towards a light surface, you should be able to see straight through that tip. And if you can't see through the tip, that's your issue. And when I looked in there, I looked on both ends. This end here, which threads in, that was all like crusted up with some sort of black crud. And so I figured that's got to be the issue when we go through and we start turning the generator here, and that spring moves in there. It's probably breaking maybe some of that crust loose, and that's why the generator kind of dies out. So what you should do with that tip, because it's usually carbon buildup, is throw it in some carb cleaner. I didn't have that, so what I used instead was this cap. In this cap was a little bit of CLP, which is cleaner, lubricant, preservative. I figured the cleaner part would maybe help me. Oops, I just dropped something. I don't know how much it helped. The biggest thing is I hit it again with that propane torch. If you got carbon in there, you usually can just burn that stuff out. So I held it with a pliers. I took the tip on that generator, and I just took my torch here and heated it up till it was hot, and then kind of cleaned it out. I know at work, our gas department, when they work on gas orifices and stuff, they got these little, like, super tiny little drill bits. I mean, they're like microscopic, and that's kind of how this is. It's just a little pinhole, and they use those to clean out the orifices. If they get dirty, then your gas appliances don't work as well. And that would be ideal for something like this. Obviously, I don't have that. Sometimes you can take the needle out of that generator, you flip that around, and if you're very careful, you can line it up with that hole in the top of the tip and kind of use that to clean it out. So I used some compressed air, like I said, the COP and some heat. After I went through and did all that, I could see light through the hole, which I couldn't before I started. So I knew I was on the right step here. So at that point, I put it all back together, and I was going to try to fire it up. I haven't yet, but I think we should try that on camera and see if I got it. I'm pretty sure I have it. Oh, one other thing. So I left it pressurized. I forgot to take the pressure off before I took this loose. And when I got this loose, the gas was seriously just shooting out of this little tube. So that kind of eliminates that there's any issue from like this point into the tank. It seemed like it was pretty good. And like I said, if this is pretty good and you had gas coming up here where it was leaking, chances are you probably have a pretty good gas supply. That may not always be the case, but just the way this thing was acting, I kind of figured it had something to do in the top end here, and it looks like, I think it was that generator. Alright, so that's what it looks like all put back together. I just pumped it up. Now, if you look, if you can see it or not, let me see if we can zoom this in a little bit. So right down here, there's like a lever that says, or there's some writing in the lever, it says light, and then it says burn. So I'm assuming for lighting it, you want to have it that way. It must have something to do with the amount of fuel or how the fuel is regulated, and then once you got it burning, you dump it all the way up. Because I know the way this works, you have raw fuel coming up in here, and in this area is where it's supposed to atomize and turn into more of like a mist, and you get those fumes in here. And once this starts burning, once you get it burning on the little burners here, then that heats up this generator, and the hotter that gets, then the better it atomizes, and then you'd rotate that lever from light to burn, and I think it must increase the fuel flow. Otherwise you end up fouling out the stove or flooding it or whatever they say. So we'll see if we can get this thing going. I'm not sure if when you turn the valve here, if that's a quarter turn for starting it. Like I said, I'm not a big stove guy. And to do this, it definitely got to be quiet because I want to hear what it's doing. Because obviously, if you just got raw gas loading up in here, you don't want an explosion or a small fire. One thing I want to note, I absolutely hate it when people go through and they like paint stuff up that's old. Like, to me, don't do that. Just leave it rusty. Like, somebody went through and painted this bottom burner part here, and they painted this. All that's going to do is, if you actually use this, it's going to burn off. It's going to smell bad. And to me, you lose all of it because chances are that wasn't black to start with from the factory. So just don't do that. So we're set on light here. I'm gonna open up the gas, and here we go. Okay, so we got raw fuel dumping out there. It's not oh, there it is. And I don't know, maybe those burner caps should be clean too. We're not getting enough oxygen through there that it's not burning so clean. Yeah, I don't think it's burning. It definitely was dumping raw gas in this assembly up there. Let's try this again and see what we get. I can hear it doing something. Like I said, it'll work better once you get the generator warm. If I was doing this a different way, I would take the propane torch and heat that generator up first, because it would just do a better job. There you go. I think so, huh? Is that... Alright, oops, sort of. I think we just lost it. Now it's loading up on gas. Oh, there it is. Oh. So it's an old stove. It's not going to just work as nice as the newer ones. Like the ones from the 70s, they light up pretty quick, pretty easily. We'll just kind of let that get going here. Oops. It's kind of hard to see on camera. And then eventually, once you get the thing warm enough, like right now it sounds like it's running pretty good. I could probably open up the gas a little bit more. Eventually that flame is going to go from yellow to just like a blue ring. Oh, that's looking good. So now I'm going to rotate this from light to burn, which really doesn't seem like it makes that much of a difference, but now it's in the burn position. I'm going to just turn the lights off here to see if we can actually see that. Yeah, it's flame a little bit better. Yeah, we got a little bit of a yellow flame in there. It seems like it's burning pretty hot though. It sounds like it's running pretty good. There you can go. You can kind of see the blue flame. I know I did notice too, if you open a thing wide open, there's like a spot where it's kind of dead and it stops. I'm not 100% sure on that. Maybe this thing isn't meant to be opened all the way up, but it definitely slows down, and then as you rotate it back to closed, there's usually like a spot where it gets hot. So I don't, unless there's still a little bit of, yeah, it could be a little bit of gunk yet in that generator. So it gets hot, I can tell you that. It definitely gets hot, and it seems to me like it's burning pretty decent, but I'm not sure about that whole business with why you rotate this open all the way that you kind of lose the flame, unless like part of that cardboard inside that generator is flaking off and it's getting stuck in the end. You can see this because it's actually getting red hot up there. That's putting out a lot of heat. So we know too that we don't have any gas leaks anywhere, because gas is bad. Raw fuel at least is bad. So then that's just how that works. Once it gets hot, then it works pretty good, and that's not bad. This is a pretty old stove here. No. Yeah, and just the way it kind of flares up like that too a little bit. It's like there must be some crust in there or something. Yeah, you know, we lost her. Yeah, there's got to be some crust working its way through there. So I don't know, I would think the more you use it, probably the better it would be. The worst case scenario is you could get one of these generators and replace it. But I don't know what the whole plan on this is. I'd rather not be the fisherman and just teach the guy how to fish, so I don't have to do this. Kind of just took this project on as a kind of help out a guy here. So there you go. Let's turn it off and we'll flip over and look at the bottom ones just to kind of see what this thing is. Paint on this stove here is just reeking. Typically they got stamps on the bottom of these that tell you what it is. It doesn't. I can't find it, at least. It didn't look very hard either. But so it says model number 500, and then below that it says use generator, and I can't make out the generator number. But like I said, you could probably find all this stuff online. Obviously it looks like the bottom is like a galvanizing or steel bottom. The fount, or what some people call the tank, that's going to be brass covered in a nickel. And then I didn't see any marking up in here either where it was stamped. I don't know, I would guess, oh, it's got to be, I would say somewhere in the 30s and 40s, just based on the cap style or whatever. I wouldn't say 50s, that seems too late for that style cap. But yeah, I think we got it here. I don't see any leaks, and I got it to start with a match, which I guess if it starts with a match, you should be good to go. Like I said, if I were to use this thing, which I don't know that I'd ever use it as an actual stove, I would take a propane torch and heat that generator up, just because this thing is really, seemed like it was really finicky starting, and who knows, if that generator, if that's original, it could be falling apart. I'm sure that cardboard tube could even be like asbestos lined or something. But so anyway, that's a project that really wasn't one of my projects, but it's completed. So we can call this one good, and that one is in the books.